Reba Mcentire gives unexpected gift to her granddaughter. What happens next shocks everyone. The silence in the Nashville recording studio was deafening. Reba Mcentire stood frozen, her weathered hands trembling as she clutched the phone that had just delivered news that would shatter everything she thought she knew about hope. The voice on the other end had been clinical, cold, final. "Mrs. Mcentire, I'm sorry, but there's nothing more we can do for Shauna. The experimental treatments have all failed. Her vocal cords are deteriorating faster than we anticipated. For 70 years, Reba had faced every challenge life threw at her with unwavering determination. She had conquered the male-dominated country music industry, survived a devastating divorce, rebuilt her empire from ashes, and stood tall through personal tragedies that would have broken lesser souls. But this moment, this crushing reality that her beloved stepdaughter might never sing again, threatened to bring the queen of country to her knees. Shauna Blackstock had been more than family to Reba for over 15 years. When Reba married Narville Blackstock, his daughter from his previous marriage had been a shy 20-year-old with dreams bigger than the Tennessee sky and a voice that could make angels weep. From their first meeting, when Shauna nervously performed an acoustic version of Sweet Dreams in their living room, Reba knew she was witnessing something extraordinary. The young woman's voice carried not just technical perfection, but a raw, emotional honesty that reminded Reba of her own early days in the business. "Honey, you've got something special," Reba had whispered that night, pulling Shauna close in an embrace that sealed their bond forever. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." But life had other plans. 5 years ago, just as Shauna's career was beginning to soar with her debut single climbing the country charts, the symptoms began. First, it was just hoarseness after performances. Then came the pain, the swelling, the gradual loss of range that no amount of vocal coaching could fix. The diagnosis came like a death sentence, a rare autoimmune condition attacking her vocal cords, slowly stealing away the gift that defined her very existence. Now, standing in the same studio where she had recorded countless hits, Reba felt the weight of every failed doctor visit, every disappointed specialist, every night she had held Shauna while she cried herself to sleep. The girl who once filled rooms with her magnificent voice now spoke in careful whispers, rationing her words like precious coins, terrified that each syllable might be her last. The irony was cruel beyond measure. Here was Reba, celebrating 50 years in the music business, her own voice stronger than ever at 70, while the person she loved most in the world was slowly losing hers. The upcoming anniversary celebration, planned for months with Nashville's biggest names confirmed to attend, now felt like a mockery. How could she celebrate when Shauna was dying inside, watching from the sidelines as life moved on without her? But Reba Mcentire hadn't become a legend by accepting defeat. As she stared at her reflection in the studio's soundproof glass, something shifted in her eyes. The despair began to crystallize into something harder, more dangerous, determination mixed with the fierce love of a mother who refused to watch her child surrender. "Not today," she whispered to her reflection, her voice carrying the same steel that had powered 5 decades of hits. Not ever. That night, Reba sat in her home office surrounded by mountains of medical journals, research papers, and contact lists. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she reached out to specialists in Switzerland, experimental researchers in Germany, and cutting-edge voice therapists in Japan. If conventional medicine had given up on Shauna, then Reba would venture into unconventional territory. She had connections everywhere, favors to call in, and resources most people could only dream of. But as she worked through the night, another idea began to take shape. Something that would require absolute secrecy, months of preparation, and the help of the most talented producers in Nashville. Something that would give Shauna back not just hope, but a piece of herself that the disease had stolen. The plan was audacious, borderline impossible, and exactly the kind of gesture that had made Reba a legend, not just for her music, but for her heart. 3 months later, Shauna sat in her small apartment, staring at the invitation to Reba's anniversary celebration. The elegant script seemed to mock her as she ran her fingers over the embossed letters. She wanted desperately to be there for the woman who had been more of a mother to her than her biological one, but the thought of being surrounded by Nashville's elite, while she could barely speak above a whisper, felt unbearable. The phone rang, and she saw Reba's name on the screen. Shauna let it ring 4 times before answering, knowing that even a simple hello would strain her damaged vocal cords. Hey, sweetheart. Reba's warm voice filled the room like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. I know you're thinking about skipping the party. Shauna's throat tightened, not from her condition but from emotion. Even after all these years, Reba could read her like an open book. Reba, Shauna's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. I can't. Everyone will be there, and I can't even— Stop right there, Reba interrupted gently but firmly. Do you remember what you told me when you were 25 and I was nervous about my comeback album? Despite her pain, Shauna smiled slightly. She remembered that night vividly. Reba had been second-guessing every decision, terrified that the industry had moved on without her. I told you that sometimes the most important moments happen when we feel least ready for them, Shauna whispered. That's right. And honey, I need you there. Not for the cameras, not for the industry folks, but for me. This celebration means nothing without you. There was something in Reba's voice that Shauna couldn't quite identify. An undercurrent of excitement, of barely contained anticipation that seemed oddly out of place given their recent struggles. Reba, is everything okay? You sound different. Reba chuckled, and Shauna could practically see her smile through the phone. Maybe I am. Maybe we both are about to be. The cryptic response left Shauna puzzled, but she found herself agreeing to attend. Something in Reba's voice, some indefinable quality she hadn't heard in months, made her curious enough to push through her anxiety. As she hung up the phone, Shauna had no idea that 3 floors below her apartment, hidden in the building's parking garage, a van filled with some of Nashville's most sought-after sound engineers was putting the finishing touches on a project that would change everything. Inside that van, surrounded by cutting-edge recording equipment, Reba sat with tears streaming down her face as she listened to the final playback. The voice coming through the speakers was unmistakably Shauna's, crystal clear and hauntingly beautiful, singing a harmony that seemed to transcend time itself. What she had accomplished over the past 3 months defied everything the doctors had said about hope, about limitations, about the boundaries between possible and impossible. But as she listened to the duet that existed only in digital magic and a mother's love, Reba knew she was about to give Shauna something far more powerful than medicine could provide. She was about to give her back her dreams. The next morning, Reba's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Dr. Heinrich Müller in Zurich. Her heart raced as she read the words she had been praying to see. Breakthrough achieved. New protocol shows 92% success rate in vocal cord regeneration. Can begin treatment immediately. Patient must come to Switzerland within 2 weeks. Reba's hands shook as she forwarded the message to her private medical consultant, Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been coordinating the international search for experimental treatments. This was it. This was the miracle they had been searching for, hidden in a small research facility in the Swiss Alps where Dr. Müller had spent 15 years developing stem cell therapies that mainstream medicine hadn't even begun to explore. But timing was everything. The anniversary celebration was in 10 days, and Reba had already set in motion the most elaborate surprise of her career. The duet project was complete, the studio booked, the guest list confirmed. Everything hinged on that perfect moment when she would give Shauna not just hope, but proof that miracles still existed in a world that had tried to steal her voice. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, planning to reveal a digital restoration of Shauna's voice at the same moment she had finally found a way to restore it physically. It was as if the universe was conspiring to give them both gifts beyond their wildest dreams. That afternoon, Reba sat in her home studio with Tommy Rodriguez, the Grammy-winning producer who had worked with everyone from Carrie Underwood to Keith Urban. Tommy had initially been skeptical when Reba approached him with her unconventional request 3 months earlier. "You want to do what exactly?" he had asked, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. "I want to take old recordings of Shauna from when she was 18, clean them up and create a duet with her voice from back then," Reba had explained. "Make it sound like we're singing together, but use her voice from before the disease took hold." Tommy had stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "That's either the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, or completely insane. Probably both." Now, 3 months later, they sat listening to the final master. The technology had advanced to the point where they could isolate Shauna's voice from old home recordings, enhance it with AI-assisted restoration, and blend it seamlessly with Reba's current vocals. The result was hauntingly beautiful, a duet between the Reba of today and the Shauna of yesterday, singing in my daughter's eyes with an emotional resonance that seemed to transcend the boundaries of time and space. "Reba," Tommy said quietly, removing his headphones, "this is going to destroy people, in the best possible way." Reba wiped tears from her eyes as she nodded. "That's the point. Shauna needs to remember who she was before this disease tried to define her. She needs to hear herself the way I still hear her every day." The celebration was being held at the historic Ryman Auditorium, the mother church of country music. Reba had specifically chosen the venue because it was where Shauna had performed her first professional gig 7 years earlier, opening for a rising star who had since become one of Nashville's biggest names. That night, Shauna had stood on the very stage where legends were made, her voice soaring through the hallowed halls with a power and purity that left the audience breathless. Now, as Reba walked through the empty auditorium, she could almost hear the echoes of that performance. The memory was so vivid she could see 28-year-old Shauna, radiant in a simple blue dress, pouring her heart out in song, while Reba watched from the wings with tears of pride streaming down her face. "She belongs here," Reba whispered to the empty seats, "and somehow, someway she's going to be back." The guest list for the anniversary celebration read like a who's who of country music royalty. Dolly Parton had confirmed her attendance, along with Carrie Underwood, Keith Urban, Blake Shelton, and Kelly Clarkson. But Reba had made it clear to everyone, this wasn't just about celebrating her career. This was about family, about love that transcends biology, and about the power of music to heal wounds that medicine couldn't touch. Kelly Clarkson had been particularly intrigued when Reba called to invite her personally. "There's something special planned for Shauna," Reba had said mysteriously, "something that's going to remind everyone why we fell in love with music in the first place." "Reba, what are you up to?" Kelly had laughed. "You sound like you're planning to move mountains." "Maybe I am," Reba had replied with a smile in her voice. "Maybe I am." 3 days before the celebration, Reba made another call to Dr. Mueller in Switzerland. The conversation was brief, but life-changing. "The treatment window is closing," Dr. Mueller explained in his precise English. "The stem cell therapy must begin within the next 2 weeks for optimal results. After that, the damage may be too extensive to reverse." Reba closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Tell Shauna now and risk overwhelming her before the celebration, or wait and potentially miss the narrow window for treatment? "Doctor, if we wait until after next week, will she still be a candidate?" "Possibly, but the success rate drops to 60%. Mrs. Mcentire, I must be frank with you. This may be her last chance." That night, Reba sat in her kitchen, staring at Shauna's contact information on her phone. Every instinct told her to call immediately, to share the incredible news about the Swiss treatment. But another part of her knew that Shauna needed the celebration first. She needed to remember who she was, needed to feel the love and support of her music family, needed to hear her own voice soaring again, even if it was through technological magic. The surprise had to come first. It had to happen exactly as planned, because Reba understood something that the doctors didn't. Healing wasn't just about fixing damaged tissue. Sometimes it was about fixing a damaged spirit first. The next morning brought a flurry of final preparations. The sound engineers arrived at the Ryman to set up the special playback system for the duet. Caterers transformed the venue's backstage area into an elegant reception space. Security teams coordinated with venue staff to ensure privacy for the intimate gathering. But most importantly, Reba spent the day with the medical team she had secretly assembled. Dr. Chen had flown in from Los Angeles, accompanied by Dr. James Patterson, one of the country's leading voice specialists. They had studied Dr. Mueller's research extensively and were prepared to facilitate Shauna's immediate transfer to Switzerland if she agreed to the experimental treatment. "Everything depends on her emotional state," Dr. Patterson explained as they reviewed the treatment protocols. "Patients who undergo this therapy with hope and determination have significantly better outcomes than those who enter it feeling defeated." Reba nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The celebration wasn't just about revealing her surprise. It was about rebuilding Shauna's confidence, reminding her of her worth, and preparing her psychologically for the fight of her life. As evening approached, Reba stood in her dressing room at the Ryman, looking at herself in the mirror. She had performed on this stage hundreds of times, but tonight felt different. Tonight wasn't about her career or her achievements. Tonight was about love in its purest form, a mother's love for her daughter, and the lengths she would go to restore what had been stolen. The phone buzzed with a text from Shauna. "On my way. Thank you for not letting me hide from this." Reba smiled, feeling a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her carefully applied makeup. In less than 2 hours, she would give Shauna a gift that would change everything. But first, she had to get through the celebration without revealing the magnitude of what was about to unfold. The arriving guests had no idea they were about to witness one of the most powerful moments in country music history. They thought they were coming to celebrate Reba's golden anniversary. They had no idea they were about to become part of a miracle that would restore faith in the impossible and prove that sometimes love really could conquer all. Outside, the Nashville skyline glittered with promise as the sun set behind the Cumberland River. Inside the mother church of country music, the stage was set for a moment that would be remembered long after the last note faded into silence. Shauna arrived at the Ryman's backstage entrance 30 minutes before the scheduled start time. She had spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that wouldn't draw attention. Her hands trembled as she applied a light layer of makeup, careful to use extra concealer around her eyes, where months of crying had left permanent shadows. The backstage area buzzed with controlled excitement. Shauna recognized voices she hadn't heard in person for years. Dolly Parton's distinctive laugh echoed from the green room, while Keith Urban's Australian accent mixed with the deeper tones of Blake Shelton's conversation. These were people who had once been colleagues, friends, collaborators. Now they felt like strangers from a life she could barely remember. "Shauna! Oh my God, look at you!" Kelly Clarkson's voice boomed across the hallway as she spotted her. Kelly rushed over, enveloping Shauna in a warm hug that lasted longer than social convention typically allowed. When she pulled back, her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I've missed seeing you around Nashville. How are you holding up?" Shauna opened her mouth to respond, but found herself unable to produce more than a whisper. The simple question, asked with such genuine concern, threatened to undo the fragile composure she had built for this evening. Kelly's expression shifted from casual greeting to deep understanding. "Hey," she said softly, taking Shauna's hands in hers. "You don't have to perform for anyone tonight, okay? We're all just here because we love Reba, and we love you." Before Shauna could attempt another whispered response, Reba appeared beside them, radiant in a flowing emerald gown that complemented her fiery hair. At 70, she moved with the confidence of a woman who had conquered every challenge life had thrown her way, yet her eyes held a tenderness that was reserved exclusively for family. "There's my girl," Reba said, her voice warm as honey as she pulled Shauna into an embrace. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Reba, Shauna began, but Reba placed a gentle finger to her lips. "Save your voice, sweetheart. Tonight is about listening, not talking." There was that mysterious quality in Reba's voice again, the same undercurrent of barely contained excitement that had puzzled Shauna during their phone conversation. The celebration began with a cocktail reception in the Ryman's restored backstage lounge. The room filled with Nashville's elite, but the atmosphere remained intimate and warm. Stories flowed as freely as the champagne, with guests sharing memories of Reba's impact on their careers and the industry as a whole. Carrie Underwood stood near the vintage piano, regaling a small group with the story of how Reba had personally called her after her American Idol win to offer guidance. "She didn't have to do that," Carrie said, glancing toward Reba across the room. "But that's who she is. She lifts up everyone around her." Dolly Parton nodded in agreement, her own eyes twinkling with mischief. "Honey, I've been in this business longer than most people have been alive, and I can tell you that Reba Mcentire is one of the rarest breeds in Nashville, a superstar with a servant's heart." Shauna lingered at the edge of these conversations, feeling like a ghost haunting her former life. Every story reminded her of dreams deferred, of opportunities lost, of the vibrant person she used to be before illness redefined her existence. She found herself unconsciously touching her throat, a nervous habit she had developed as her voice deteriorated. "You're doing that thing again," a familiar voice said beside her. Shauna turned to find Marcus Williams, her former vocal coach and longtime friend. Marcus had been in the room the night she first showed symptoms, had been the first to suggest she see a doctor when her voice began failing during a recording session. What thing? Shauna whispered. Touching your throat like you're trying to hold your voice in. Marcus's expression was gentle but concerned. Shauna, you know that your worth isn't tied to whether you can sing, right? The question hit her like a physical blow. Of course, her worth was tied to singing. Music wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. Without her voice, she was nothing more than a spectator in a world that had once welcomed her as a participant. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed slightly, and Reba moved to the center of the room. The conversations gradually quieted as all attention turned to the woman of the hour. Y'all, thank you so much for being here tonight, Reba began, her voice carrying easily through the room without amplification. 50 years in this business feels like a lifetime and a heartbeat all at once. I've been blessed beyond measure, and most of those blessings are standing right here in this room. Applause filled the space, but Reba held up a hand to quiet it. Now, before we head out to the stage for the official program, I want to share something with y'all. This milestone isn't just about looking back at what's been accomplished. It's also about looking forward to what's still possible. Shauna felt Reba's eyes find hers across the room, and something in that gaze made her heart race with anticipation. Music has always been about connection, Reba continued, never breaking eye contact with Shauna. It's about reaching across time and space and touching someone's soul with nothing but melody and truth. Tonight, I want to share with you the most important connection music has ever given me. The room fell completely silent. Even the catering staff stopped moving, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Shauna, sweetheart, would you come up here with me? Every eye in the room turned toward Shauna, who felt her cheeks burn with sudden embarrassment. She shook her head slightly, not wanting to be the center of attention when she couldn't even speak properly. But Reba's smile was insistent, encouraging, and somehow irresistible. Go on, Kelly whispered, giving her a gentle nudge. Reba's got that look in her eye, the one that means she's about to change someone's life. On unsteady legs, Shauna made her way through the crowd to where Reba waited. When she reached her, Reba took her hand and squeezed it gently. 15 years ago, this young lady walked into my life and changed everything, Reba told the gathered crowd. She wasn't just Narvel's daughter from a previous marriage. She became my daughter, my friend, my inspiration, and one of the most talented singers I've ever had the privilege to know. Shauna's eyes filled with tears as she tried to protest silently, shaking her head at the praise she no longer felt she deserved. Now, I know that life has thrown some challenges at our girl here, Reba continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. But I also know that challenges don't define us, they reveal us. And what they've revealed about Shauna is that she has a strength and grace that puts the rest of us to shame. The room erupted in supportive applause, and Shauna felt overwhelmed by the love radiating from these people who had once been her peers and were now treating her like a wounded bird in need of protection. But tonight, Reba said, raising her voice above the applause, tonight I want to give Shauna something back, something that no disease, no circumstance, no amount of time can ever truly take away. She signaled to Tommy Rodriguez, who had been waiting near a portable sound system that Shauna hadn't noticed being wheeled in. Tommy nodded and began connecting his equipment, his movements quick and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, Reba announced, her voice now carrying an excitement that was impossible to contain, I'd like you to hear something very special. A few months ago, I had an idea that some people called crazy and others called impossible. I wanted to sing with Shauna again, the way we used to sing together in my kitchen on Sunday mornings. Shauna's breath caught in her throat. She remembered those Sunday mornings vividly, lazy weekend sessions where they would harmonize while making breakfast, their voices blending so naturally it felt like breathing. The thing is, Reba continued, I couldn't ask her to sing with me now, because I know how much it would hurt, but I could do something else. So I could reach back through time and find that voice again, that beautiful instrument that brought so much joy to everyone who heard it. Tommy gave Reba a thumbs up, indicating the system was ready. The room held its collective breath as Reba moved to stand beside Shauna, taking her hand again. Shauna, this is for you. This is to remind you that your voice, the real one, the one that lives in your heart and your soul, can never be silenced. The first notes filled the room like liquid gold, and Shauna's knees nearly buckled as she heard her own voice, crystal clear and soaring, singing the opening lines of In My Daughter's Eyes. But this wasn't a recording she remembered making. This was her voice as it had been 7 years ago, enhanced and perfected, carrying a purity she had almost forgotten existed. Then Reba's current voice joined in, creating a duet that spanned time itself. The two voices wove together with an intimacy that spoke of countless hours spent in harmony, of a bond that transcended the typical relationship between mentor and student, between stepmother and stepdaughter. Shauna listened in stunned silence as her younger self sang words that now carried prophetic weight. "In my daughter's eyes I am a hero. I am strong and wise, and I know no fear." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room that these were the exact qualities Reba saw in Shauna, even when Shauna couldn't see them in herself. As the song reached its climax, with both voices soaring in perfect harmony, Shauna felt something breaking open inside her chest. It wasn't pain this time, but recognition. She was hearing herself as Reba heard her, as everyone in this room heard her, not as a broken singer, but as a complete human being whose voice was just one facet of her infinite worth. The final notes faded into profound silence, and then the room exploded in applause. But Shauna heard none of it. All she could hear was the echo of her own voice, restored to its full glory through love and technology, reminding her of who she had been and who she could still become. She turned to Reba with tears streaming down her face, and for the first time in months she found her voice, not the damaged whisper she had grown accustomed to, but something deeper, more fundamental. "How?" was all she managed to say, but it was enough. Reba smiled through her own tears, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of months of secret planning and desperate hope. "Honey, when you love someone the way I love you, impossible becomes just another word for challenge. But this is only the beginning." The crowd began to murmur with confusion at Reba's cryptic statement, but Shauna understood. There was more. Whatever had just happened with the duet was only the opening act of something bigger, something that would change everything. Reba raised her hand again, and the room fell silent once more. The energy had shifted palpably. What had begun as a celebration was transforming into something far more profound and intimate. "That duet was created from recordings we found in my home studio," Reba explained, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly building within her. "Shauna used to come over when she was 18, 19 years old, and we'd just sing together for hours. I saved those recordings because they captured something pure and beautiful, and I'm so grateful I did." She paused, looking directly at Shauna, with an expression that seemed to carry the weight of months of secret hope and determination. "But Shauna, that's not the real gift I want to give you tonight." The room seemed to hold its breath. Even seasoned performers like Dolly and Carrie, who had seen countless emotional moments in their careers, sensed they were witnessing something unprecedented. 3 months ago, when we got that last disappointing report from the doctors, I made a decision," Reba continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I decided that incurable was just another word for not solved yet. I decided that if conventional medicine had reached its limits, then we needed to go beyond conventional." Shauna's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. The mysterious phone calls, the secretive meetings, the way Reba had seemed different over the past few weeks, it all suddenly made sense. "I reached out to specialists all over the world. I contacted researchers in Switzerland, Germany, Japan, and Israel. I spoke with doctors who work with experimental therapies that most people have never even heard of." Reba's voice was gaining momentum now, powered by months of suppressed excitement and hope. "And Shauna, sweetheart, we found something." Dr. Sarah Chen stepped forward from where she had been quietly observing near the back of the room. Her presence had gone unnoticed by most of the guests, but now all eyes turned to the elegantly dressed woman who clearly represented something significant. "This is Dr. Chen," Reba announced, gesturing toward the newcomer. "She's been coordinating with medical teams across 3 continents, and 3 days ago, we got news that's going to change your life." Shauna felt her legs growing weak. She reached out to steady herself against a nearby chair, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. After years of disappointment, of doors closing and hopes being crushed, the possibility that there might actually be a solution felt almost too overwhelming to consider. Dr. Chen stepped forward, her professional demeanor softened by genuine warmth and excitement. "Shauna, I've been following your case for months now, working with Mrs. Mcentire to explore every possible avenue for treatment. 2 weeks ago, we received confirmation from Dr. Heinrich Müller's research facility in Zurich that they've achieved a breakthrough in stem cell therapy for autoimmune damaged vocal cords. The words hung in the air like a prayer, finally answered. Several guests gasped audibly, and Kelly Clarkson moved closer to Shauna's side, ready to provide support if needed. The success rate is 92% for patients in your exact condition, Dr. Chen continued, her voice gentle but confident. The treatment involves a 3-week intensive therapy program using your own stem cells, combined with targeted immunotherapy to prevent future autoimmune attacks on your vocal cords. Shauna tried to speak, but found herself completely speechless, not from her condition this time, but from the sheer magnitude of what she was hearing. After 5 years of progressive deterioration, after countless specialists had told her there was nothing more they could do, the possibility of actual restoration seemed like something from a dream. The treatment window is narrow, Dr. Chen explained. We would need to begin within the next 10 days for optimal results. But Shauna, based on everything we know about your case, your age, and your overall health, you're an ideal candidate. Reba moved to stand beside Shauna, taking her hand once again. But that's still not everything, sweetheart. Somehow, impossibly, there was more. Shauna looked at Reba with eyes wide with disbelief and growing hope. While Dr. Chen was coordinating your medical treatment, I was working on something else, Reba said, her smile growing brighter with each word. I called in some favors with people I've worked with over the years. Big Machine Records has agreed to offer you a recording contract, contingent on your successful treatment and recovery. The room erupted in surprised exclamations and applause, but Reba wasn't finished. Scott Borchetta himself wants to meet with you as soon as you're ready. They're prepared to give you the full treatment. Top-tier producers, unlimited studio time, complete creative control, and a marketing budget that would make established artists jealous. Shauna felt her knees buckle, and both Kelly and Marcus reached out to steady her. The combination of hope, fear, excitement, and disbelief was overwhelming her completely. And, Reba continued, clearly saving the best for last, once you've recorded your album and feel ready to perform again, the Grand Ole Opry has extended a standing invitation for you to make your comeback performance on their stage. With me, if you'll have me as your duet partner. The room fell into stunned silence as the full magnitude of Reba's gift became clear. This wasn't just about medical treatment or career opportunities. This was about restoration in every sense of the word, physical, professional, and spiritual. Shauna stared at Reba for a long moment, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but everyone in the room heard her clearly. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do all this for me?" Reba's own tears began flowing as she pulled Shauna into an embrace that seemed to encompass all the love, hope, and determination of the past 3 months. "Because you're my daughter," Reba said simply. "Not by blood, maybe, but by choice. By love. By all the Sunday morning harmonies and late-night conversations and dreams we've shared together. You're my daughter, and I'll be damned if I'm going to watch you give up on yourself when I know what you're capable of." The embrace lasted for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. Around them, Nashville's biggest stars wiped away tears and watched in awed silence as they witnessed love in its purest, most powerful form. When they finally separated, Shauna looked around the room at all these people who had once been her colleagues and realized they still were. They had never stopped seeing her as one of them, even when she had stopped seeing herself that way. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Say yes," Kelly Clarkson called out from where she stood, her own cheeks wet with tears. "Say yes to all of it." "Say yes," echoed Carrie Underwood. "Say yes, honey," added Dolly Parton, her voice carrying the wisdom of decades in the music business. Soon the entire room was chanting softly, "Say yes. Say yes. Say yes." Shauna looked around at these faces, some of the most successful and influential people in country music, all united in their support for her comeback. Then she looked at Reba, who was watching her with an expression of pure love and unwavering faith. "Yes," Shauna said, and though her voice was still damaged, the word carried more power and determination than any note she had ever sung. Yes to all of it. The room exploded in celebration, with applause and cheers that seemed to shake the historic walls of the Ryman Auditorium. But above it all, Shauna could swear she heard something else, the faint echo of her own voice, whole and strong, promising that this was just the beginning of her real comeback story. As the evening continued and guests moved toward the main auditorium for the official anniversary program, Shauna found herself surrounded by well-wishers and offers of support. Blake Shelton promised to help with any songwriting she might need. Keith Urban offered his home studio for practice sessions. Carrie Underwood insisted on sharing her own experiences with voice coaches who specialized in recovery from injury. But through it all, Shauna kept returning to that moment when Reba had said the words that changed everything. "You're my daughter." Not like a daughter or almost a daughter, but simply, definitively, my daughter. As they prepared to move to the stage for the public portion of the evening, Reba pulled Shauna aside one more time. "Are you okay with all this?" she asked quietly. "I know it's a lot to process." Shauna nodded, though her mind was still reeling from everything that had happened. "Reba, I need you to know something. For the past 5 years, I felt like I was disappearing. Like every day, a little more of who I was just vanished. But tonight, listening to that duet, hearing my voice again, learning about the treatment and the opportunities," she paused, searching for the right words. "Tonight, for the first time in years, I feel like myself again. Not the sick version of myself, not the broken version, but the real me. The me who used to dream big and believe anything was possible." Reba smiled through fresh tears. "Honey, that person never left. She was just waiting for the right moment to come back out and shine." As they walked toward the stage together, arm in arm, Shauna realized that regardless of how the medical treatment went, regardless of whether her voice ever fully returned, something fundamental had already been healed. Her spirit had been restored, her hope renewed, and her family, her real chosen family, had reminded her that she was never alone in this fight. The evening's official program was a tribute to Reba's 50-year career, but for Shauna, it felt like the launch of something entirely new. As she sat in the audience watching various performers honor the woman who had just moved mountains for her, she began to understand that this was what love looked like when it refused to accept defeat. This was what miracles looked like when they came wrapped in a mother's determination and a daughter's courage to hope again. 6 weeks later, Shauna stood in a small recording booth in Zurich, Switzerland, her hands trembling as she prepared to test her voice for the first time since completing Dr. Möller's revolutionary stem cell treatment. The past month and a half had been a whirlwind of medical procedures, intensive therapy sessions and careful monitoring as her body worked to regenerate the damaged tissue in her vocal cords. "Doctor," Mueller observed from the control room, his eyes focused intently on the various monitors that tracked her vocal cord function in real time. Beside him sat Reba, who had refused to leave Shauna's side throughout the entire treatment process, turning down 3 concert opportunities and a television special to be there for every appointment, every setback, and every small victory. "Remember," Dr. Mueller said gently through the intercom, "we are not looking for perfection today. We simply want to see if the regeneration process has taken hold. Start with simple vocal exercises, nothing more." Shauna nodded, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. For 5 years, the act of producing sound had become associated with pain, frustration, and loss. Now, as she prepared to discover whether the miracle treatment had worked, she felt a mixture of hope and terror that threatened to overwhelm her completely. She began with the most basic exercise her vocal coach had taught her as a teenager, a simple R sound, held steady for as long as comfortable. The first note that emerged from her throat was tentative, shaky, but clear. Not the damaged whisper she had grown accustomed to, but an actual musical tone. Reba's hands flew to her mouth as tears immediately sprang to her eyes. Even that single, imperfect note carried more promise than anything they had heard in years. "Very good, Doctor," Mueller encouraged. "Continue with the scale exercises we practiced yesterday." For the next 20 minutes, Shauna worked through increasingly complex vocal exercises. With each passing minute, her confidence grew as she realized that her voice was not only returning, but seemed to be stronger than it had been even before the disease struck. The stem cell therapy hadn't just repaired the damage, it had somehow enhanced her natural abilities. "Shauna," Reba said softly through the intercom, her voice thick with emotion, "do you think you could try singing something? Just a few lines of anything you remember?" Shauna looked through the glass at the woman who had moved heaven and earth to make this moment possible. Without hesitation, she began to sing the opening lines of "In My Daughter's Eyes." the same song they had shared virtually at the anniversary celebration. But this time there was no digital enhancement, no technological magic. This was Shauna's own voice, restored and renewed, carrying a depth of emotion that came from having walked through the valley of loss and emerged on the other side. The notes soared with a purity and power that made Dr. Miller's eyebrows raise in amazement. In 30 years of treating vocal injuries, he had never witnessed such complete restoration, let alone improvement beyond the original baseline. When Shauna finished the verse, the recording booth fell silent except for the sound of Reba's quiet sobbing. Through the glass, Shauna could see that even the usually composed Dr. Mueller was wiping his eyes. "Shauna," Dr. Mueller said finally, his professional demeanor cracking with genuine emotion. "In my entire career, I have never seen results like this. Your voice is not just healed, it's stronger than our baseline recordings indicate it ever was before the damage occurred." That evening, Shauna and Reba sat in their hotel room, sharing a quiet dinner and processing the magnitude of what had happened. The call to Scott Borchetta at Big Machine Records had been brief but enthusiastic. He wanted to meet with Shauna as soon as she returned to Nashville to discuss not just one album, but a multi-album deal that would give her complete creative control. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is all a dream," Shauna said, her voice still carrying traces of wonder as she spoke in full, clear tones for the first time in years. "Honey, if this is a dream, then we're both having the same one," Reba replied with a smile. "And I have no intention of waking up." The flight back to Nashville 3 days later felt like a journey between two different worlds. The woman who had left Tennessee 6 weeks earlier had been broken, defeated, clinging to hope by the thinnest of threads. The woman who returned carried herself with a confidence that radiated from deep within, her voice strong and sure as she chatted easily with flight attendants and fellow passengers who recognized them. The recording sessions at Big Machine began 2 weeks after their return. Scott Borchetta had assembled a team of Nashville's finest producers and musicians, all eager to work with the singer whose comeback story had already become legend throughout the industry. The first song Shauna recorded was an original composition she had written during her recovery in Switzerland, a powerful ballad called "Finding My Voice Again" that chronicled her journey from despair to restoration. When she sang the final note, the entire studio fell silent for a full 30 seconds before erupting in spontaneous applause. "That's not just a song," declared Tommy Rodriguez, who had volunteered his services for the project. "That's a testimony. That's hope in musical form." Over the following months, Shauna threw herself into the recording process with an intensity that surprised even her. The album, titled Restored, became a deeply personal exploration of loss, hope, family love, and second chances. Each track carried the weight of her experience while celebrating the joy of rediscovering her gift. Reba appeared as a featured artist on 3 tracks, including a studio version of In My Daughter's Eyes that brought their virtual duet into perfect reality. The harmonies they created together spoke of years of shared struggles and triumphs, of a bond that had been tested by adversity and emerged stronger than ever. The album's lead single, Miracle in Nashville, told the story of Reba's incredible gesture of love and became an instant hit on country radio. But more than its commercial success, the song served as an inspiration to families everywhere dealing with medical challenges and the power of refusing to accept defeat. As release day approached, the Grand Ole Opry reached out to schedule Shauna's comeback performance. The date was set for a special Saturday night show that would feature multiple generations of country music stars, but everyone understood that Shauna's appearance would be the emotional centerpiece of the evening. The night of the Opry performance, Shauna stood in the wings of the historic venue, wearing a flowing white dress that seemed to glow under the stage lights. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, her voice warmed up and ready for the performance that would officially mark her return to the world of professional country music. "You ready for this?" Reba asked, appearing beside her in a complimentary silver gown. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Shauna replied, her voice strong and sure. As their names were announced, and they walked onto the Opry stage together, the audience rose in a thunderous standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Many in the crowd were crying before they had even sung a note, moved by the knowledge of what this moment represented. They opened with Miracle in Nashville, Shauna's voice soaring through the hallowed halls with a power and emotion that left no doubt that she was exactly where she belonged. The song told their story. of love that transcends biology, of hope that refuses to die, and of the miracles that happen when someone believes in you more than you believe in yourself. For their second song, they performed the studio version of In My Daughter's Eyes, with Shauna taking the lead vocals and Reba providing harmony. The performance was flawless, but more than technical perfection. It showcased the deep emotional connection between two women who had chosen each other as family. As the final notes faded and the audience erupted in another standing ovation, Shauna felt a completeness she hadn't experienced in years. She was whole again, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. The disease had taken her voice for a time, but it had also led her to discover strengths she never knew she possessed, and had deepened her appreciation for the gift of music in ways that success alone never could have taught her. In the weeks that followed, Restored debuted at #1 on the country charts and crossed over to significant mainstream success. The album's message of hope and second chances resonated with audiences far beyond country music, inspiring countless individuals facing their own seemingly insurmountable challenges. Shauna embarked on a small tour of intimate venues, each performance a celebration not just of her musical return, but of the power of love to overcome impossible odds. At every show, she told the story of Reba's gift, ensuring that audiences understood that her comeback was as much about family as it was about music. The tour's final performance was held at the Ryman Auditorium, returning full circle to the venue where Reba's anniversary celebration had changed everything. As Shauna took her final bow on the Mother Church stage, she looked out into the audience and spotted Reba in the front row, tears of pride streaming down her face. Later that evening, as they sat together in the same dressing room where Shauna had once felt like a ghost haunting her former life, the transformation was complete and undeniable. "I need you to know something," Shauna said, taking Reba's hands in hers. "You didn't just give me back my voice. You gave me back my life, my purpose, my future. You showed me what unconditional love looks like, and I'll spend the rest of my career trying to pass that gift along to others." Reba smiled through her tears, seeing in Shauna's eyes not just the talented singer she had always been, but the wise, grateful woman she had become through adversity and restoration. "Honey," Reba said softly, "that's what mothers do. We fight for our children, no matter how impossible the fight might seem. And you, Shauna Blackstock, are my daughter in every way that truly matters." As they embraced in the quiet dressing room, both women understood that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a medical miracle or a career comeback, but the kind of love story that proves that families aren't just born, they're built through choice, commitment, and the courage to never give up on each other. Shauna's voice had been restored, but more importantly, so had her faith in the power of hope and the unbreakable bonds of chosen family. The present Reba had given her wasn't just a second chance at her dreams. It was proof that sometimes the most incredible gifts come wrapped in a mother's love and delivered through sheer determination to make the impossible possible. Years later, when interviewers would ask Shauna about the moment that changed her life, she would always return to that night at the Ryman when Reba played their virtual duet. Not because of the technology that made it possible, but because of the love that inspired it. That was the moment she learned that being truly seen and valued by someone who refuses to let you give up on yourself is the greatest gift anyone can receive. And in Nashville, where dreams are built on talent and sustained by determination, their story became legend, proof that sometimes miracles aren't just about divine intervention, but about human love that refuses to accept limitations and will move mountains to restore what seems forever lost.